The computer was a beautiful object, something you want to look at and have in your home. And what if, instead of it being in the right hands, it was in everyone's hands?
We'd be talking about the most tectonic shift in the status quo since
Ever.
I'm begging you to manage expectations.
Have I ever let you down?
Every single goddamn time.
Then I'm due.
Your Apple stock is worth $441 million. And your daughter and her mother are on welfare.
She's not my daughter!
You must be able to see that she looks like you.
We will know soon enough if you were Leonardo da Vinci or just think you are.
You're the only one who sees the world the same way I do.
no one sees the world the same way you do.
Everyone is waiting for the Mac.
What are people going to do with it?
It's an abstract.
They're gonna do that?
You're issuing contradictory instructions. You're insubordinate. You make people miserable.
The board believes you're no longer necessary to this company.
I sat in a garage and invented the future because artists lead and hacks ask for a show of hands.
What you make isn't supposed to be the best part of you. When you're a father, that's what's supposed to be the best part of you.
I'm the only one who knows that this guy is someone you invented.
Is there a plan?
The plan will reveal itself to you when you're ready to see it.
Well, it's happening.
The comeback of a superstar.
Co-founder Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs is returning to Apple.
Two most significant events of the 20th century. The Allies win the war, and this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Jobs.
Thanks, everybody. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on another great film. The three of you have an incredible amount of amazing films in your canon. So, congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Aaron, I want to start with you. The script kind of starts with you with Walter Isaacson's book. Steve Jobs represents so many things to so many people. When you started writing the script, I know you had met with him one time because he enjoyed an episode of The West Wing, right? But what did Steve Jobs represent to you? What was the first thing that you were really interested in capturing?
You know, honestly, Steve Jobs didn't mean that much to me. I have all the devices. Everything I've ever written, I've written on a Mac. I have an iPhone. I have an iPad. I still like my iPod because I like the clicking wheel. So I don't listen to music on my phone. But I was so surprised when he died, which was just 4 years ago this week, as a matter of fact, at the size and the emotion of the eulogizing. It really took me by surprise. It felt the same way that it did when John Lennon was killed. And so I became immediately interested in why. What did I miss that so many other people were getting? And when I started working on this, I started to find out. And one thing, before I knew what I wanted to do, I knew what I didn't want to do, which was a biopic. The cradle-to-grave structure that where you land on the greatest hits of the person along the way, that I wanted to do something different, and finally landed on what it is, which is the whole movie is 3 scenes, all of them in real time. Real time, of course, is when 30 minutes for you and the audience is the same as 30 minutes for a character on the screen. And they would all take place backstage in the moments leading up to a product launch. That would require a visual master to come in and add, make this visually exciting, and it would also require a director who could get great performances out of great actors, and I'm describing Danny Boyle.
Enter Danny.
Yeah.
He seems so reasonable now, doesn't he? But actually, what he does is he gives you this enormous piece of work, which is just extraordinary. It's both like intimidating, and also it's a challenge, really, which is an overused word, but it's just like saying, there, can you do something with that character for the actors and to the director? Can you make it into a film? Because it's just like this. It's not a stream of consciousness because it's so brilliantly fashioned, But it is the sound of a man's mind, in this case, this man who shaped our lives to such a degree. And in that mind are swirling around these other characters. It's an incredible force that you meet when you read one of his scripts, and you have to pull yourself up and get on with it.
What helped you to get a handle on this massive script? What was the sort of the anchor that tied you to it visually or aesthetically, helped you figure out how you were going to make this film?
It's the only clue he gives you. It's like 3 acts, 1984, 1988, and 1998. And we decided to separate those experiences as much as possible. They involved all the same actors, meeting him 40 minutes, 30 minutes before he goes on stage to the image we all know. But it was to make them all almost like separate experiences, but they are bound together ultimately. The depth charges are laid all the way through, which you finally begin to ignite and sound in the final part. So it was to try and make each experience as vivid and as self-contained as possible in a way.
Can we talk about this 3-act structure? Because it's really incredible, because you're not doing a cradle-to-grave story, but you are hitting really great moments about his life within this in a very natural way. And I rewatched the Social Network recently, and you do that as well in that. You have all these little tidbits about Mark Zuckerberg's biography that come up in very natural, organic ways, not in the way of sort of letting you know this is when he was born and this is his high school graduation.
Right.
And so when you set up this structure, this 3-act structure, is that a challenge for yourself? Are you going in as a writer and being like, oh, this will be a really difficult challenge for me to hit all of these points within this very tight, confined structure?
Yes, it's going to be a challenge for yourself. You do have things in mind that you want to hit along the way, but if you get to the end and discover that there was something you didn't hit, for instance, we go through this entire movie and Pixar is never mentioned in this, and you think, gee, how do you do this without doing? And you realize, okay, that Pixar would certainly be important to any biography of Steve Jobs. It just wasn't important to this story. It wasn't the story we were telling. So at least you tell yourself that to make to feel okay about having left it out.
Jeff, you've worked with Sorkin before. You did a few seasons of The Newsroom. Can you talk about working with Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs in this? I know that you guys rehearsed for 2 weeks leading up to the shoots, right?
Yeah, we had Danny
I'm sorry,
no,
but it was because this was an amazing thing that Danny insisted on. We rehearsed for just the first act for 2 weeks, then shot the first act, then shut down production, which is an expensive thing to do, to rehearse the second act for 2 weeks, shot the second act, rehearsed the third act for 2 weeks, and then shot the third act.
How'd you get away with that, Danny?
Yeah, it's difficult to explain that, but well, actually what we said, we had 2 things. We said, that's not that we drew the line there. That's the line in the sand. It has to be that way. And the other one was we were going to shoot in San Francisco because they want you, because a lot of it's interiors, they want you to shoot. You could shoot in Hungary. There are theaters in Hungary you could use. And you can save like $5 million by going there and doing it. But we felt it belonged to the town and we must pay respect to the town. And it is, because it's shaping the world, even as we speak, the stuff that's coming out of there. And we wanted this rehearsal process so that the actors could own it. Because this stuff is amazing, but if you don't own it, it'll crush you as an actor. And you've got to. And Jeff has actually, who'd worked with him before, taught us a lot about that, about getting. Because the way you used to describe it was like an animal that you had to get on top of and wrestle to the ground and kind of control, and then you release it and you're off. Anyway, that's what they used to say.
It's scary. I mean, when you get an Aaron script, whether it's an episode of Newsroom or Jobs. It's daunting, and I had been through it before. I know that you can do it, and that there's only one way to do it, and there's a kind of, on movies you can paraphrase, you can kind of sort of know it, you can memorize it in the makeup chair, and then you can kind of let it happen in front of the camera. That's not what you do with Aaron. It's like what you do in the theater. You don't change a word. The playwright is king or queen, and so you memorize every word and forget about ad-libbing. And it's a wonderful, but that takes a lot of time. And so that's what Michael was faced with, because he had the big burden. We all had a lot to do, but he had a hell of a lot to do. So those weeks of rehearsal really helped us, but it really gave Michael time to not only memorize it, but get on top of it, so as Danny said, he could own it.
What was it like for you to be able to do a Sorkin script with 2 weeks of rehearsal? I mean, when you're doing the newsroom, you're getting episodes in sort of as you're about to shoot them, right? Now you have a fair amount of time to really prep the dialogue and the script.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was nice, but you're not, when you're playing Scully, you're not there, you're not in the movie the whole time, right. So you're not at rehearsals all the time. So it really was great for Michael in particular, and that was, we all want Michael to be great, which happily he is. But how can we help you be great is the attitude that I think all of us went into, as well as doing our own work.
Let's talk about Michael Fassbender as casting. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not he looked like Steve Jobs. I have to say, as soon as the movie started, what I loved about it was that he doesn't look exactly like Steve Jobs. It takes me out of the reality of a biopic and brings me into a movie that can take liberties, that can tell a story. Was that one of the reasons that you made that decision to go with him, outside of the fact that he's just a brilliant actor?
Well, your first thing is get a great actor. Doesn't matter whether they look like him or not. It's like, it just makes you, because with this kind of material, there's only a few people you can get who are going to be able to manage it, I think, and shine in it. And so it was that really, and it's also his motto. Jobs' motto was think different, and we always used to say feel different, see different. Those were always those were kind of our mantras about it. So it didn't matter that he didn't look like him. We wanted to approach it from the inside first, really. And what's weird, what happens, and I think we were all astonished in this, is that by the time you get to the third section, 1998, he sort of is him. He both looks like him as well, and he sort of becomes him in a weird way. But he's done it from the inside out, moving outwards rather than the surface veneer to begin with, yeah.
But Ricky, I actually think what you said at the beginning was important. It's not only something that didn't really matter to us, and in writing it, I never sought to do a Steve Jobs impersonation. We never asked any of the actors to impersonate who they were playing. But like you said at the beginning, because he doesn't look like Steve Jobs, it sends a message to the audience that this is something impressionistic, that it's a painting and not a photograph.
When you're writing something that's impressionistic, what do you find? I mean, I don't personally care when I'm watching a movie, if it's a biopic or whatever, it's responsibility to fact. I want to watch a good movie that is impressionistic, that gives me an idea about the person and a take on it. But when you're writing that, where do you come from in terms of the liberties that you feel comfortable taking?
First of all, it depends what the film is. If it were, for instance, if I were writing All the President's Men, I wouldn't make up anything if we're telling the true story because then you really you're coming much closer to journalism than a painting. You're coming much closer to a photograph. With this, if you're writing about real people, even if it is a painting, you kind of live by the Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm, and there are no important truths I'm going to fudge. For instance, Jeff's character, John Scully, never spoke to Steve Jobs again after Jobs left Apple in 1986. Yet in this movie, he has two more scenes, one in 1988 and one in 1998, but those scenes are still about what happened in 1984. And having spent a lot of time with Scully and knowing about the disagreement there and the emotion there between these two guys, I was perfectly fine imagining those scenes. I wasn't hurting anybody, and nor did I think I was damaging history at all. You have your own inner compass about this. If your inner compass is broken, the studio's legal department is happy to help you out. They're not going to let you, say something that isn't true, that's defamatory.
Do you have to submit something like that when you do a story like this to the legal department? Like, these are the liberties that we took, just to let you know?
You submit a fully annotated script to the legal department. And by fully annotated, I mean that anything that even suggests a fact. If you have a character pour themselves a shot of tequila while they're talking, the studio will send you a note saying, please, show evidence that this person did shots of tequila. My favorite legal note wasn't on this. It was on an early episode of The West Wing. Before it was early on. The show, nobody knew what the show was going to be. Nobody knew if the show was going to be a hit, certainly. And in I think the second episode ever, a U.S. Air Force jet wanders into Syrian airspace accidentally and gets shot down. And that was heavily protested by the Arab American Anti-Defamation League, and they sent a strongly worded letter to NBC and to our studio, Warner Brothers. And maybe 3 or 4 episodes later, I had the character of Toby, Richard Schiff, just make an offhand remark about Hebrew slaves in Egypt 5,000 years ago. And the legal department sent me a note saying, please show your research. And I sent them Exodus. And just said, this is the way I was taught at every Passover Seder. Am I wrong about this? Because I have to talk to my grandparents. We may be in a bad mood over nothing. But yes, you send a completely annotated script, and they make you, this is a legal department that has one client, and their job is to make sure that their client doesn't get sued. But they want you to be able to make the movie that you're making, so they'll suggest ways that you can do this.
Jeff, we were talking about your scenes as Scully with Michael Fassbender, and you have these 3 incredible scenes. You have this one in the middle of the movie in the second act that is just astounding. The 2 of you going at it for, I think, 10 minutes. It's unbelievable. The writing is incredible. Your performances are great, and Danny's direction is so interesting. And I was talking to Danny about this in the green room. Is that we know Danny is this incredible montage artist in many ways, and what he did with your dialogue-driven scenes was make montages out of them. But then he told me that he only shot with 1 or 2 cameras at a time, yet this is a montage of many shots of this scene. How many times were you doing these scenes of dialogue, and how difficult did it get for you sometimes? And judging by Danny's face, it sounds like it was exhausting.
I was okay with it because I'd been through Newsroom where we were 3 or 4 cameras, I think, at times, and if you're at the anchor desk, there were even more than that. So Michael was the one. Michael was the one going, what is he doing with the camera? He's moving it around. I said, don't worry about the camera. The camera's not here. You just right here. Stay here. But no, he moved it around, and it's interesting. Over a long career, when you're with a filmmaker, right, which is different than just a director. And where he was put, Danny would try to explain to me what he's going to do with this shot up through the 55 Margot toward, and I go, Danny, I don't care. I just don't care. First of all, I got 8 pages to remember in my head, and second, I can't wait till the premiere when you get to see how he marries through the editing, through the shot selection, through all those angles. How he gets to marry that to Aaron's script and the rhythm of that. It's rare that you see actors, directors, screenwriting, all making the same movie. There's a rhythm to it, and I was blown away by it when I saw it. Really was.
Danny, how do you create the rhythm? I mean, in the words of Jobs in the movie, how do you play the orchestra to sort of build that simpatico rhythm?
You reveal the rhythm, really, is what you're doing, because it's there. And I think what the great thing you get when you get A-list actors is, you can hear it, can't you? You can, because rhythm is so important to you. You build meaning through rhythm incrementally. It's just kind of changing and flowing, and it's referenced back and forward. But A-list actors, as soon as they get on their feet and start speaking it, you can feel it. It's there. So, of course, then you go, well, what can we do with it? What else can we do with it? Because they're honing in on it. And it's like Jeff says, he's not really that bothered about the camera because he's got so much to play with the scene. The other thing you get with actors is they give you variation with great actors, because when you get in the editing room, you realize you can do it. There's detail there. But if you don't use that shot, there's detail somewhere else. Right. And that is something I'd never really fully experienced until this cast. Him, Winslet, you get it with Kate Winslet as well, and Michael, obviously, and then Seth Rogen, who will be a major actor. He's a major comedian, but there's a very serious and good actor in there as well. And Michael Stuhlbarg.
Stuhlbarg is amazing in the film. Stuhlbarg is incredible, yeah.
Stuhlbarg is incredible in everything that he does. I haven't seen Trumbo yet, but I know that he's going to be great in that. And Seth is an absolutely dead for real actor, and by the way, was the second funniest person in this cast. Kate Winslet is the funniest person you're ever going to meet. She really is. She would make us laugh every day. She's funny in the movie, and somebody really needs to write like a sophisticated comedy for her to do, like a remake of The African Queen. You know?
I mean, Kate Winslet is funny. Michael Fassbender is very funny too.
Yes.
Someone should write it, yeah.
Yes, Fassbender is funny, especially for someone who's part German. No, he's not here. I can say this.
No, seriously. No, he
actually has the ability to see this, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, oh yes. Oh yeah, he may well be watching us. So there is the Cary Grant in him. I mean, you see that in the Tarantino movie in Inglourious. He's got that. So you get this ferocious intensity that he blazes through it, but there's wit in there as well. And it's not just his wit, and he gets some great lines. It's also comedians set up other people's lines. And you could see him and Winslet setting laughs up for each other like that. So it's great to see that. And he'll do a kind of Cary Grant, I think, at some point, because he's got that within him as well, you know?
Absolutely. Aaron, because of this film, I think, and because of The Social Network and some episodes of The Newsroom, you've been sort of deemed as like our cultural critic of technology. Do you feel like you are that, or is that a responsibility that you feel like you have?
I agree that I've been deemed that by some people, but I don't deserve it. I don't have those kinds of qualifications. I'm not technically sophisticated at all. I know what I need to know. I know how to use my phone. I know how to use my laptop, that kind of thing. I don't get a big charge out of technology the way a lot of people do. And honestly, I don't mean to be a critic of technology. With The Social Network, I just thought there was a great story to tell there. The thing that drew me to it first was this very interesting lawsuit that I was drawn to, and then there were other things I saw that could be dramatized. And with Steve Jobs, it happens to be a coincidence that Danny doesn't believe this. I think that it's a coincidence that it's another tech titan. Danny thinks I am actually doing this on purpose.
See what the similarities between the two films I find are not necessarily that they're about tech titans, but they're about what your character says in the movie, which are tectonic shifts in the culture, right? Mm-hmm. The home computer shifts the culture in a big way. Facebook shifts the culture in a way regarding our privacy and how we view ourselves and how we connect with each other. It's not necessarily about these titans. It's about how they completely rearrange the culture. And I know, Danny, you've said in interviews that we have to talk about these companies. We have to talk about the culture because we're growing to the point where they are almost like oil industries, and we're fearful of them because they're so powerful.
Well, they're much greater they're much bigger now than the oil companies, and yet they have a friendly easiness about them that makes you think that they are yours. But of course,
on our side, we can connect with each other.
And that may be true, but you know, there are little glimpses. We're beginning to get little glimpses now of the way it could turn out, you know, to do with privacy and to do with data, personal data. And therefore, you need to ask questions of them, and films need to be made about them big time. And so I think it is, we're in a fine lineage. I think Social Network, I could see the connection between Social Network and this, and there should be others as well. When they sent the script to this, I just finished the Dave Eggers book, The Circle, which is an amazing idea about kind of the future, the near future of when these companies have achieved some of the things they're setting out to achieve. You know, what might happen to us when they do that. So it's important to have that conversation about them.
For you, Aaron, is it the titans of history that you are interested in, or is it the shifts in the culture that are what interests you?
Listen, I have to write about people. It's great when ideas come along with that, but I really need to just cling to the basics of intention and obstacles. Somebody wants something, and something's standing in their way of getting it. In a couple of cases, in the things that I've written, they have been titans of tech, titans of something, but not always. So I am interested in those cultural shifts. I think that I've always said if you lined up 10 writers and asked them to write about Steve Jobs, you would get 10 different movies, all of which were perfectly credible. We're well on our way to proving that. By the way, I think ours is number 6 or something. But for instance, one thing that we didn't talk about in The Social Network, one thing that we don't talk about in this, is that these movements tend to be started by people who want to disrupt the establishment, and then they're so successful that they quickly become the establishment. But we don't really do that in this movie. We didn't talk about it in The Social Network. Social Network ultimately was... Here's where I do think there are similarities between the two films. I think, and this is, you have to remember, you're getting a psychological diagnosis of people I've never met from someone who has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in musical theater. Okay.
Musical theater? I didn't know that one.
Yep, BFA in musical theater.
Wait, quick, what's your favorite musical?
The Man of La Mancha.
Okay.
Why did you hold your head when I said it? Do you have it's sensational. I have. I think that Mark Zuckerberg invented something that he needed, and it turned out a billion other people wanted it too. And I think that Steve Jobs just felt himself damaged in some way, kind of unworthy of being liked and unworthy of being loved. And he had a remarkable ability to make products or wrangle the people who made the products, play the orchestra, as he said, and infuse these products with a personality, and so we're emotional about them. We have a relationship. A lot of people do have a relationship with these products, and through that surrogate, he was able to be liked and loved, because you liked and loved. In other words, bringing it back to the beginning, I think that Steve was eulogized the way he was by so many people who had never met him, because they felt like they had. Because they loved their iPod so much, they loved their phone so much, they loved their Mac so much, that the man who did this must have been someone they loved. I can identify with that feeling.
Absolutely. I think we have time for some questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
I am so glad that you brought up The West Wing, because I have been binge watching it. And how did you come up with far-fetched as a Yiddish word?
Yeah, I think I posited that there should be 3 honorary Yiddish words: far-fetched, spatula, and ladle. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I can't remember. But thank you for the question and for watching.
Next question.
Yeah. And this is for Mr. Boyle and Mr. Sorkin. If you, in looking over the Isaacson book, thought that he was a son of a bitch and wanted in your screenplay to emphasize those characteristics, could you have had a mainstream movie that would have been successful and all the producers, the distributors would have bought it, with not a nice guy generally when you left the theater? Wouldn't that cut into your box office? Would you have the courage to have done it?
Kind of do it here and there in the movie a little bit. He's a son of a bitch for a little while.
Yeah, you see, I mean, you can't do the character. There's so much known about him or rumored about him, the stories. You can't do it without covering the fact that he, was challenging in the way that he dealt with people. And it was a big factor. I remember my thinking about Fassbender. As an actor, if you look at his work, he's uncompromising. He doesn't do likability just because other people want him to be likable. He'll find that in the moment, if it's there, if it's real, but he is uncompromising in the journey he goes on and expects you to join with him. And you think about his work, if you've ever seen his film Hunger, it's a phenomenal piece of work. And that was always the factor, that we would get an actor who was as uncompromising as Aaron's script was, really. And it was to show a complex man and many, many different sides of him, really. And there's good stuff and bad stuff about us all, really.
There were even a couple of actors, a couple of movie stars who were discussed for the part and discarded because there was a worry that, as talented as they are, that their gravitational pull was going to be, they were going to worry about not being liked. And that, I mean, these are very gifted actors who can just do a little bit of this and a little bit of that just to make sure that, yes, I'm being mean to this person, but you like me still. And Danny's right. Michael is uncompromising about that. But I'll tell you what I wouldn't do is write a movie, a nonfiction movie about a son of a bitch just to nail him, to say, gee, everybody in the world thinks he's a nice guy, but I've got enough evidence that he's a son of a bitch, and so I'm going to do that. There's nothing there for me in that. There's no joy in that.
Aaron, had you seen Hunger or even his role in Inglourious Bastards? I mean, those are really prime examples of him most likely being able to do a Sorkin script as an actor.
I have now. I hadn't. It was fairly well publicized. Okay, and I appreciate that. Because of the Sony hack, it was fairly well publicized that I was not initially on board for the casting of Michael. It was a terrible thing for Michael to have to read. But I hope that I made it clear to him that at that time I was the only person in the world who was not familiar with Michael Fassbender's work. I immediately got myself familiar with it over a great weekend of watching all of his movies, and then I was the captain of the Fassbender cheerleading squad.
Absolutely. Next question.
One last question.
Hi, this is for Danny. What is it like directing an Aaron Sorkin screenplay as opposed to others?
There's a lot more of it. That's the biggest thing. They're normally, you get a script, it's like 100, 120 pages, and half of that will be descriptions about how to do things, which you then work out how to ignore if you can as a film director. But in this, there's none of that description because there's no room for it. There's just 185 pages of dialogue.
Okay, but you're probably not going to turn the page and the character cuts off his own arm, right? There's that.
But it could be very daunting, and you can see how you could read it as daunting. But I remember thinking it was so exciting that someone would have the confidence to take this guy on in his own way, i.e. not a factual biopic, but essentially it felt truthful. The feel of it was truthful. You check out the facts and you realize, like he said, there's a legal department making sure they are pretty accurate. But the feel of it was very accurate. But to take on a script where somebody's had the confidence to deal with a man like him who was about innovation and to do it in an innovative way. What more can you ask here? Form equals content. It's perfect, and then it's up to you. And then it's the challenges to you. Can you do it? Can you make it as visceral and as visual as it is linguistically wonderful, And I can see off your faces, you like the language. You love his language. And we all do, and we hope you like the visuals as well,
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to end it, guys. Congratulations on the film.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Of course. I wasn't going after this.
No, I didn't think you were. I was the one.